All right. We'll try to keep this conversation as casual as possible, as open-ended as possible. We actually wanted to do this conversation a few months ago, but I believe both Greg and the OriginTrail bunch on our end were pretty busy. But I think the good news is that Greg has just returned from a pretty long trip, and he's carrying with him a lot of interesting experience that can really color this conversation into something that can give us a lot some good idea as to what's going on in the Web3 space, what's going on in the banking space. So just a little bit of a context. Greg has also been our advisor for a year, and formally, I believe Greg's Hard Yaka, so the fund that he helped establish, have been working with us for some 2 years. So we already have a path in a way, and we can discuss things that are both of the interest of OriginTrail community and Hard Yaka's community. So perhaps without further ado, we can all present ourselves, and let's give it to Greg Kidd to tell a little bit about himself, and then we can move forward to the other guys.
Thanks for hosting me. I think if folks don't know me, I'm with Hard Yaka. We invest in projects that are about self-sovereignty and inclusion. Really excited about OriginTrail. I came up from management consulting, did a startup that was kind of like the Uber space, distributed dispatch. We learned a lot from that. That fortunately turned into projects like Twitter and Square. I did spend some time at the Federal Reserve in the payments group, figuring out like what works and doesn't work about the US financial system, and was really excited when crypto came along to build a new set of rails for the world. Of late, we'll talk more today about some of the new protocols for Web 3.0 in social media. We'll also talk about how the world of financial transactions has changed in the wake of the blow up of some of the 2.0 centralized crypto exchanges, and now actually the blow up of some of the banks that were banking those firms. And it is a brave new world in 2023 from what things looked like in 2021. Excited to be part of it, and really excited to be part of the blockchain activities that OriginTrail has done that has persevered through all this other distraction in the crypto world.
Awesome. Today is going to be about knowledge sharing, and as we like to say, knowledge is power, and knowledge shared is power multiplied. So Tomash, please introduce yourself, and then Branimir, and you can also color your presentation into what we will pitch in this discussion a little bit.
Yeah, hi folks. This is Tomash, one of the founders at Trace Labs, who are the core developers of OriginTrail. I've been obviously building with Shiga and Branimir for better part of what is now a decade. And even though we've had a lot of insights happen across this time span, and a lot of learnings that are kind of made their way into what the OriginTrail is today, it still feels today that we are really kind of very early in the impact that we are creating in this space. And even having a chance to kind of speak with Greg on some of the topics that are burning today, it's exciting because it kind of shows the innovation potential that this space holds in kind of making a change in the world for the better, hopefully. So at OriginTrail, we've seen the release of very powerful new features coming up with OriginTrail that are fostering knowledge sharing across the globe, and are bringing some very powerful innovation in how we can think about knowledge, how we think about owning knowledge, how we think about creating value out of knowledge, either as individuals or organizations, and then really leveraging what we're creating through these knowledge assets also in solutions that are showing immense potential, like also in the sphere of AI, which has basically been one of the catalysts that has been in our minds when we were discussing how this foundation of knowledge that we're building with OriginTrail will come about. So that's kind of some of the topics that also have been on my mind and are exciting me for the coming period. I'll kick it off to Brana then.
Thanks, Tomash, and hi everyone. I'm Branimir. If you don't know me, I'm also one of the three founders of Trace Labs. Also the CTO, so kind of the technical designer behind what OriginTrail has been about for the past decade. As Tomash said, it's been evolving quite a bit up until just recently. It got into version 6 of the OriginTrail decentralized knowledge graph. And a very brief intro on what that is a very interesting synergy of various technologies, blockchains on one hand, knowledge graphs, which are the culmination of the semantic web industry on the other hand, and then with extension to modern machine learning and AI techniques. Also happy to be here with our advisor and mentor, Greg. Yeah, looking forward to the discussion. This is going to be exciting.
All right. By the way, I'm Shiga, one of the co-founders as well here with OriginTrail. And what we like to say at OriginTrail that, of course, we started in supply chains. Our aim was also to improve transparency and trust in the transactions that transpire in the exchange of goods in supply chains. In that way, we try to improve the sustainability of how the global economy essentially works, because we as consumers are ultimately the voters for what kind of world we want to live tomorrow and what kind of products we buy eventually determine, how the world will look like. And, because of the fast expansion of the technology and what OriginTrail is also capable of supporting, we like to say that what books were for Amazon, supply chains are for OriginTrail, meaning that supply chains are only the beginning. And we're happy also to be covering some other topics that we can cover a little bit later on. But I would really like to talk to Greg, because he just came back from a long travel from so many places. He can tell us a little bit more about, many interesting people he met, many projects he got involved in, both in the banking space and in the social media. So both areas which are burning essentially lately. Perhaps social media, Twitter, and Elon Musk, and the banking space because of the stable coins and their obsoleteness or their inefficiency. So please, Greg, let us know what's going on your side.
Well, yeah, thanks for that. I mean, the world seems a very different place from where it was on New Year's Day. Centralization has taken a big set of hits, both on in the crypto world, in the banking world, and really in the social media world. There's a new protocol called Noster, and it is a version of decentralized social media, which means that you can leave and take your followers, take your tweet history or your posting history with you and go to another platform. And it has a decentralized set of relays of servers where all the content sits. So even if you're blocked in one place, you'll find somewhere else. So it's censorship resistant, it's portable, and Elon's already taken to banning the use of the word Noster. If you talk about it on Twitter, he'll ban you. And that's really sort of the problem. He bought the network to basically be censorship resistant, and he's just become the chief censor. And so this community was started by a bunch of, I guess you'd call them Bitcoin and Lightning maximalists, but it allows essentially the replacement of central actors in social media with a decentralized network of relays. And it's already picked up about 6 million users since the start of the year, and it's a foundation that anyone can build on. So it doesn't matter which client you build or what area you're in. If you use this protocol, users can be found, and all their history of content, all their contact lists is portable. And so on the same front, imagine if that's happening for money. We saw that the 2.0 silos of FTX already blew up. Binance is now in trouble. Banks that banked these companies, or even just startups in general, have all been in trouble. And so the things that are gaining steam again are more decentralized models of ledgers, not just for crypto, but for fiat as well. So we're beginning to see, just like with Noster, you can take your your data with you regarding your contacts and your social media postings, we're seeing other protocols like some of the ones we're working on, where you can take your money and it doesn't matter what wallet you use or even what metaverse partner or marketplace you go to, your money travels with you, your credentials travel with you. And that's what's happening now. We're seeing more examples of self-sovereignty, and we're seeing them work all across the world. And so our interests, our investments are in any of those type things. And so yes, the Noster conference was in Costa Rica. Jack Dorsey was there. He's been sponsoring it too, even though that's going to essentially upend his original creation, Twitter. But I was probably like the only business person there. I had to wear a t-shirt that said norms on it, meaning I was just a normal person, wasn't a coder. So it's very early on with these protocols. They're mostly just geeks behind it, but I do have that early sense and feeling at the beginning of crypto back in like 2012 that we're at the start of something. And it feels the same way over in DeFi. After a really horrible 2022, the markets are beginning to recover, and the really meritorious projects that truly are decentralized are gaining traction, while rocks are still falling from the sky on the Web 2.0 crypto exchanges and the banks that service them. Quick snapshot.
Thank you. I mean, I'm sure it's even more to it than you've just told us, but this is already immensely interesting. I'm sure our community at OriginTrail is going to look into what Noster is all about and other projects that you've mentioned. For those who want to know more, get to know more about Noster, it's noster.com. I tried to find it just by looking at it, by finding it through the Noster keyword, and it offers noster.org. So it's noster.com, not noster.org.
It is. It is. But the person who's leading it is some guy that we never can quite see or meet. His name is Fiat Jeff. All I know is he's from Brazil. But it is, it's kind of an underground movement right now, but it's a very significant concept. It's very simple. It's that instead of having a central server through which social media posting's going, there's just a network of servers. So, at the end of the day, if you can't find someone to host your content, you can set up your own server. And so the place that identity comes in is everybody has a public-private key pair. And if I'm going to follow you, I just follow you and you post to whatever relay that you want. And so it is a decentralized set of server nodes that hold all the content. And so the social graph is no longer controlled by any single point of failure. It's a very simple and elegant notion. And then if you overlay a payments network on top of that, you're kind of off to the races, because now you have all the data in the world and all the money in the world cruising around. And if you add to that credentials, well, then for things like OriginTrail, you begin to have people with reputation that you can trust. It's not just what is the information on the knowledge graph, it's who signed it, right? And you can get trust in who signed it without necessarily having to shred the privacy of the person that's doing that signing. And so it's privacy preserving while still able to be trusted, because one of the other things that's portable here, in addition to your social media postings and your messages and your money, are your credentials, right? And so that's always the question I have when I'm looking at a supply chain like OriginTrail. Like, yeah, the information on it is amazing, but who signed it? And can I trust the signor? And so we're seeing strides forward in that area as well.
Mm. Yeah, that's a very, very good point. And with the permissionlessness and the decentralization, there is no single party who can impact the vastness of knowledge. And if we're witnessing how the monetary system has evolved recently, and right now with this big problem becoming all too apparent, it's becoming more and more compelling for people to really understand what Bitcoin's vision is all about. And same goes for the social media, which is, let's say, somewhat younger in terms of the existence than Bitcoin, not much, but still. But I think it's becoming right now very much apparent how important it is that we have censorship resistance also established within the social media space, and that people can really gain self-sovereignty in that regards. That includes identities as well. And we're looking forward to seeing how OriginTrail can interoperate also with products like Noster. And OriginTrail has always been about, not solving everything by itself, because it's still a protocol. It's a decentralized knowledge graph that can work in unison with legacy systems, and that came to be very much apparent in supply chains, and also with a little bit more high-level applications. And we're looking forward right now to be revealing more new stuff coming to existence on OriginTrail from many other directions, not just supply chains. Of course, supply chains were a very good beginning, and still we have a lot of, and actually a growing number of partners that are using OriginTrail for supply chain purposes. And this is really giving us a lot of useful lessons, since supply chains are not just chains. They're not linear. They're essentially like social networks in a way. Every supply chain is a network, and it kind of mimics the same needs as social media almost. And now with the advent of a little bit more popular use of artificial intelligence, is becoming even more so important that people understand what kind of sources, what kind of knowledge sources were used by AI systems to construct an answer, because an answer can be either hallucination, can be biased, and that can, inform people's decisions in a very, very wrong way. So in this kind of third section, the AI section, we believe that both OriginTrail and projects like Noster and the rest can really play a huge role as kind of a principal leaders. Tomash, Branimir, would you go a little bit more into what's going on our side?
Yeah, all right, I'll go first. I can understand. No, I was just listening as well to kind of Greg speak about Noster's values, the way they approach things, and kind of censorship resistance, importance of identity, being able to have that self-sovereign overlook over something you created, and just the alignment of thinking with how OriginTrails, decentralized knowledge graph, and the knowledge assets, their function is just it's so much there, right? And even in the follow-up of this conversation, I'm excited to see if there's going to be some knowledge assets already popping up on Noster as a way of showcasing what's being done by whom, who's the owner of what, and things like that, or taking other integration routes and doing that. And that's, I guess, the beauty when you do more open innovation, like permissionless networks, you allow for connections to forge. And these connections then they foster these network effects. Either that is through allowing more human interactions, or that is allowing more machine interactions, or connections across multiple data points. This is where kind of we'll see the higher value outputs getting created. So like when I'm thinking of really the knowledge asset as this building block of how OriginTrail is created and the decentralized knowledge graph is constructed, it's really about, it's almost like an element with hooks, and where can it append to? What type of connections can it forge? So it is about that open connectivity, I guess, that's going to facilitate more of this value getting created. And when you're then thinking through the prism of AI readiness, or what kind of these different solutions, which in some ways they seem they're so powerful, right? They can create things that almost seem like magic-like, but on the other hand, they are also very much dependent on how the models are trained. They're very much dependent on the sources that they were trained on, or if they are manipulating other inputs, where do those inputs come from? Who issued them? What's the identity behind it? And if we then overlay the financial kind of capabilities on top of it, which can be done through centralized attempts, I guess, also through Twitter, and then what they're trying to do there with what was it, eToro's latest attempt? Or
yes, that's right,
kind of
another 2.0 solution.
Yeah, so let's see. I mean, that's one way of kind of doing it, and I feel that they're going to bump into a lot of kind of walls when it comes to within those gardens. Whereas when you have a more open approach, you allow for more kind of connectivity, my bet is that has significantly higher potential for the future uptake. So like that's.
Yeah, so like we're not anti 2.0. It's just like with something like Noster, you could imagine you have a piece of content you're going to post. And you could choose, well, I'll post it on Instagram, or I'll post it on Twitter, or I'll post it on Reddit. But what we're really talking about now is why not just post it on Noster, and then there'd be a bunch of connectors that posts it onto all of those type things. And then whoever follows you, wherever they're following you from, they'll find your content regardless of which platform they're on. And then with something like Matrix, it doesn't matter if you're on Telegram or WhatsApp, it's your identity that I'm sending the message to. The fact that you're going to get it on Telegram versus WhatsApp, that's abstracted away protocol, right? And so at the end of the day, everything is between people or entities, and which platform you used shouldn't really matter, right? Like what we care about is the underlying content or money getting, exchanged between the right people. So we're really trying to remove, and we're not going to eliminate all those, the wallets, the browser, but they don't own the data. It's not trapped within them. They're just basically viewers, right? And so it's a very, like once you've taken and drunk the Kool-Aid, there's really no going back for me. It's true, it's going to take time. The Web 2.0 companies and world is still very powerful. It has a lot of users. It has critical mass. But once you've kind of, drunk the Kool-Aid with Fiat Jeff or whoever this group of these coders are, they've got a vision, and it's from me, my point of view, it's inescapable. I can't tell you when it will happen, but when something like FTX blowing up and Binance having the problems it has and the banks blowing up, it kind of tells you that the so powerful looking 2.0 reality we live in, it's kind of built on sand. And like when the tide comes in and tide goes out, every time I'm sort of surprised at how many folks that I thought were dominant in the industry are now just a history chapter in Wikipedia.
Totally on point. I was about to say, because of all of what we're talking about here and what we're all excited about is this connectivity, or composability rather, also of protocols. So you can stack things on top, like the internet is open and it's built on protocols stacked on top of each other. While if you do it the other way, like some tried to do it, for example, in this, let's say, blockchain for supply chain case, we had the situation where we had some unusual semi-blockchain permission systems implemented by giants, Web 2.0 industry, IBM, which ended up being completely discontinued. And like you said, a historical entry in Wikipedia. In the end, it was, for us, in a way, it was always obvious that you needed a permissionless open system built on standards that anybody can use, versus something that's going to become another walled garden, even though it has a blockchain underneath or something. So I feel you. I think that's the same thing when it comes to Noster. Even when you think about Jack Dorsey, he, from what I know, the history of Twitter, the idea for Twitter was to start in a way as a protocol at the beginning.
It was, we got caught into the thing of like, well, but how are you going to make money? And so they basically closed off the API and bought up the leading client. And that's when Twitter became a micro blogging company as opposed to a communications protocol. And we had a saying at Twitter, which is, Twitter's too important to be left to Twitter. And that's what happens when, the venture capitalized prematurely monetize what should have been or could have been a protocol, and then just turn it into a business. And so, mea culpa, Jack in his own way, I in my own way, are trying to rectify that, that era. But we have a lot of sins to make up for, but we're happily working on it now.
Well, if that was 2017, Twitter would go ICO and things like that would not have happened.
Yeah, well, but we still think there's ways to monetize a protocol. I mean, you guys are going through the same thing. Like, where do you monetize the protocol? But it does take a different kind of patience, and and probably a different business model than let's get a bunch of user data and then send them a bunch of stinky ads, right? Like that is one way of thinking about it. But, that was the easy Web 1 and even Web 2 way of doing it. But now we think people will pay for value up and down the value chain. It helps if you're in the payments flow, because as long as you're not too greedy, people will pay for value. And so that's why we're excited by seeing not just what's going on with Noster, but seeing some of these new payment rail things that have been learned from crypto being applied now to fiat currency. And we think that there will be fiat currency flowing over the same rails as cryptocurrency. And, that will make it very easy to interlay micropayment services, and a lot of little micropayments add up and right into the supply chain, right? So all of this, just as the items flow in the supply chain, so should the money flow from the value created from that origin trail view of the data.
Yeah, and also the trick is really to get the sensation of value to the people, to the organizations that used to be those who were pointing fingers at the industry, at Web3, saying it's not worthy of anything, that it's a scam, and it takes patience to build Web3 infrastructure. It takes time, and sometimes you need to be both building a very complex, a very low-level protocols, which obviously is very hard. No one has ever done it. And at the same time, you need to make sure that you validate what you built. So you need to go out and speak to the the people, the mortals, the normies, to get their perspective and to hopefully garner their support. And in our experience, even with the most traditional companies within the supply chain space, say the bunch of orgs we work with from states, which are working together under the so-called SCAN. So that's a supplier compliance audit network. So it's a bunch of companies, some of the biggest ones in the world, like Walmart, JCPenney, Costco. So they came together to share essentially knowledge about importers to the United States. So they would exchange things like audit reports with one another without knowing who's the owner of the audit report, because that's obviously a competitive advantage. And we got a testimonial from one of the executives from I believe it was guys help me out, Ken McElroy out of
Home Depot.
And he would say he's been working with Home Depot for like 20 years, and he would say that if someone had told him 20 years ago that he needed to share information with Walmart, he would have quit the job. But now, after he started working with SCAN and seeing this essentially taking place via OriginTrail, he sees how beneficial it is for companies that are still competing to exchange knowledge, because they can all benefit from this new system. And things like that would not have been possible within the Web2 world, siloed world. That's why we say that knowledge is power. But once you give rails to the knowledge to be exchanged, to be pollinated across different directions, this is where the knowledge really gains power. And OriginTrail hopefully will be able to also support or work in unison with projects like Noster, because I think we live in a very small world essentially, and things like supply chains, things like social media, monetary systems, they all intertwine. You cannot separate them anymore. They will become even more so part of the one thing, and that's why we need to be building stuff that can interoperate with each other. Sorry, Branimir, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I mean, I agree on all the points. It's very interesting when you think about it, that it's not just SCAN and the importers into the US. There's many companies that are learning. For example, we've been active in the railway industry as well. And especially in Europe, there's a lot of initiatives into integrating systems, and they actually learned very early on that it's not possible to integrate one-to-one. They need a system that is a layer, a protocol that is able to make this sharing of information somehow sensible. So it's not that every time a new company joins, it has to integrate with everybody separately again. It's the actual spearheading entity in this regard is the Swiss Railways. They are the most advanced ones. We've been working with them for 3.5 years now, I believe, tracking all kinds of things. And it's very similar because they are not publishing tweets, but they are publishing information on events. So, and all of this becomes very useful knowledge. So yeah, absolutely agree on all fronts.
Historically, at Twitter, we did not have the name tweets. We had the name status updates. And if you think about it, what Twitter was a big state machine. I saw it when there was an account which had a microphone. It was on a ping pong table, and it would listen. And when it could hear the ping pong ball bouncing, it would say occupied. And when there was no more bouncing sound, it would say available. And so it became a state system, kind of like a supply chain system of like, what is the state of things? And, the concept of it being tweets was like a user created concept. And we fought it for a long time because we thought of ourselves as a giant state machine. Google was authoritative search. We were diachronic search, which is you could find out what the current state was by looking at the change in state over time. And so Google might have been very good for figuring out, who's the authoritative source on Michael Jackson. But if you wanted to find out whether he had just died, you'd have to look on Twitter because that was breaking news. And in a state machine, you're always just trying to figure out what the current state of the world is. And so there was a fundamental lack of understanding about search for a long time to think of it as only like authoritative search. And that's why Eric Schmidt, the CEO of Google at the time, he called when somebody asked him about Twitter, he said, well, that's just poor man's email. And, a funny story is my friends used to make fun of us because, at Twitter, we not only didn't have a profit model, we didn't have a revenue model. And one day I came to the office and I says, well, I have good news and bad news. And they said, well, they were all ex-regulators. So they said, what's the bad news? I says, well, we only have 2 paying customers. And they said, what's the good news? I said, well, it's Google and Microsoft. They're each going to pay us $25 million a year because they want to buy our feed of status updates so they can improve their search results, right? To include breaking news rather than just counting links of historical information on a topic. And that was, again, sort of like an awakening moment for me. Supply chain is a living thing. Like everything is a construct of all the things that happened before it that you get to that state. And there's an extreme value, both to knowing the history, but knowing to where that brings you today, because based on that, you're going to make a decision, go or not go, based on like the state of things in that supply chain. And so, there's a history of Twitter that in the early days, it looked more like potentially a big supply chain system because it just told you like how we got to where we were. We went off the rails on that, and it became more about like what Paris Hilton had for lunch. But the construct was still there, but the pursuit of the almighty advertising dollar really degraded the concept of Twitter as a protocol and made it into a platform. And it had its run as a platform, but for me, life is more interesting at the protocol level because that just brings the whole world along, as opposed to basically creating a sort of a CompuServe America Online opportunity. You create a World Wide Web opportunity. And that's, again, that's what's sort of exciting to me with the level that, OriginTrail is working as. It really gets down close to the iron on the protocol.
And you also mentioned something very related, actually. It's search. And just as Google has traditionally been this gatekeeper of search, basically ingesting the entire internet nonstop and paying Twitter. I didn't know this detail, tiny $25 million detail, but yeah, basically they would ingest and organize all of this information in order for us to be able to discover it. And in many ways, at least for us, it seems very obvious that search functionality also needs to become a protocol for the web. And therefore, OriginTrail has actually always been about discoverability. We haven't called it search per se, but there's a search functionality, querying functionality that you can do in a decentralized way on the decentralized knowledge graph. And which is traditionally search is, like you said, it's about counting the number of words on some web page and then how many links to each other. That's like Google PageRank, how they started it. Which is not to say that that doesn't work well, that works pretty well, but over time, people have kind of figured out how to hack that, and
Yes.
newer things were coming into play, right? And in a way, Google had to guard against that also. But today, there's a lot of new exciting things. But generally, it comes down to creating some sort of index, and this index ideally is something that is also implemented on a protocol and also open and permissionless, so that anybody is able to contribute to the index, to query the index. And in many ways, for example, if you were to query, you can also think of searching on Twitter. Does the result of the search, or even just let's say the feed that you get by default, the for you tweet feed, right? It's also kind of like a search. It's there's a search query somewhere underneath that says, show this guy what we think he should see, right? Ultimately, somebody controls that, right? It's a very big power to be able to decide how that works.
It is. There was a time at Twitter where you could put in a term like house, and every time somebody said the word house, you would get that tweet. Now, that quickly blew up the system. And so the reason that Twitter didn't become a protocol that could operate at an SLA level of quality was we didn't really structure the data. Well, we didn't structure it at all. And so the ability to do search on Twitter and feel that you're going to get every single result, we don't support that. It was too computationally difficult. So in contrast to OriginTrail, you can't just give a sample of results. When people are dealing with a supply chain issue, you need to know that every single item has a trail of provenance, and you can't just give a sample of results. And so, there's been specialization, and that's why, Twitter isn't really a protocol. It's just it's a fun social media kind of thing, but it could have been something much more like what OriginTrail aspires to be, which is an SLA level of quality where you can make decisions that are sometimes life and death decisions about, the supply chain of things that lead to a decision as to whether a particular product or offering is safe, right? Because it has checked all the boxes all along the way. It's not expired, it's not counterfeit, and we need that in today's world to have trust that every time we pop open a bottle or step onto some form of transportation, that all the boxes have been checked. We take that for granted. But for that to actually work, there is this amazing process of creating confidence all along the road of the supply chain, and doing that because it's all trapped within one company versus doing that at at this overall level of interoperation. I'd much rather live in the latter world that you guys are helping create.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with that as well. And I'm just thinking that with the width of experience also from Twitter, seeing it go from something that was kind of one version of a product reality, and then turning that into a mainstream adopted product. When you are looking at technologies like Noster and OriginTrail, and we kind of touched upon the role that Web 2.0 companies and actors play in this, what do you see the conditions, the perfect storm that needs to brew up for this level of adoption to come about?
Well, for us, and this is sort of a social political statement, there's always this pyramid of what's at the top, and what has been at the top have been these Web 2.0 companies and other just traditional institutions in other industries. Mm-hmm. And there they are, and then they have accounts and they assign users to those accounts. In the new world, if you flip that pyramid around, everything starts with the user. There was a time when if you changed from one phone company to another, you had to give up your phone number. because the phone company owned your phone number, and a way of locking you in was to say, well, if you leave, you're leaving us and we own your phone number. You have to get another phone number. But now in the phone industry, users own their phone numbers, and the phone companies service you and your phone number. And if we can start to see that in other areas, like your money, like if you switch from one financial institution to another, your money simply stays in the account. You just have a different financial institution servicing it. And you could have multiple financial institutions servicing your account. It's your money. And so if you start to take that across everything, your medical records, the assets that you own, they belong to someone, either a person or an entity at a point in time. There's a trail of provenance, and other folks may service that. They may add value to that. Wherever they are in the value chain or in the supply chain, that's just a story. But it's a story of following the goods and following the people that own the goods. And all those other institutions, they're not at the top of the pyramid. The people and the goods that they use, create, they're at the center of the system. And so it's a user-centric, item-centric view of the world. And all these other institutions, and I'm not anti-institution, I'm not anti-government or anti-corporation, but they're there to serve the people and the goods that are being tracked in a supply chain. And I don't know, it makes me feel like I'm not living in a world where I'm an ant. Like, it makes me feel like the world is, people often say, well, we came up with this discovery that the earth revolves around the sun. And if I'm the earth, I'd kind of like the sun to revolve around me. And so it gives you that feeling of empowerment. And around the goods and services that we use and we hold on to, it's the whole thing with NFTs and whatnot. You have this feeling that everything has a title and it has an owner, and then everything else, once again, the sun revolves around the earth, and it's a better world to live in from a psychic space, because I don't feel like a cog in a machine. I feel like the machine works around me and my fellow persons and the goods and services that we control, right? Not the other way around.
Yeah, it's the age-old agent structure dichotomy and debate, I guess. And this time we have the also technological tools to make the structure function for the agent rather than vice versa.
It genuinely feels that way. Sometimes you have to go to Costa Rica to get that feeling, but it's very early. I don't want to pretend that this has already happened. We still live primarily in a 2.0 world, but when you see like a bank like Silicon Valley Bank collapse in a number of hours, you realize that these things that we thought were absolutely solid and steadfast can be gone over the weekend. And once you see a few of those things disappear, then you really need to have a hard reflection about what is enduring in this world, because these black swan events we have, they keep coming all the time. Pretty soon people have to start talking about white swans. There's so many black swans that our definition of what is unexpected has got to change, because we keep being surprised in bigger ways and more often all the time. And so that's like a wake-up call, to me at least.
Yeah, no, it seems that we're going to be kind of asking the question, why use something, why use these new technologies, until the question will be why not, because it'll just be clearly more sensible, and then like all the arguments are building up as it literally every day passes. So yeah, I guess that leads us to, from the more longer term, to what's next in the coming period for you in terms of your focus, and then I think we can return the favor as well on what's coming up in OT ecosystem.
Well, our focus is giving everyone an identity such that they have control over their credentials, their messages, their social media postings, all their goods, which you can think of as like NFTs, and all their money. And all that needs to be portable And it also needs to work not just in sort of a Mad Max crypto anarchy world, it needs to work in a world of law and order without being Orwellian. So we're not looking for it to be like a totalitarian world where Big Brother can see all that stuff. And yet it still needs to be compliant. And so we don't want it to be like a creepy Mark Zuckerberg Facebook world. We'd like it to be more like Star Trek. Star Trek, must have an amazing supply chain network because the Romulans, the Klingons, they all seem to be able to get access in the supply chain to like dilithium crystals to power their starships. And so we don't have the script for how it got to that. But I think that's the script that OriginTrail is working on, is to make that supply chain work so that in an intergalactic world, everything still works smoothly. The doors open for the good guys and the doors remain shut for the bad guys, right? That's the missing script that you guys are writing. At least that's what I hope you're doing.
Very much inspired by Star Trek in many ways, yes. So we actually had
one
an
possible
entire
thing at a
working
time.
group. Yeah, in the ecosystem called Starfleet,
right.
which, hey, Starfleet folks who are listening. but yeah, it's very interesting to see such kind of a society. We don't have many of those utopian science fiction things anymore, right? Everything is very dark and dystopian lately. So I really like that you mentioned this.
Well, I mean, there are amazing things happening. I mean, we're inundated by all the, the bad stuff. I mean, just like the Russia-Ukraine war, it's terrible. If you look, depends on how you look at it. There's all this innovation that's happening there. I'm sad for all the loss of life. But once again, I mean, it's a huge experiment in supply chain. And so I'm always seeing the silver lining in things. I know there's a lot of like, bad things happening out there, but it all to us is like a wake-up call. And so I am sort of excited to read the news every day. I know there's global warming and all this other stuff, but the ingenuity we're seeing from people, to me, seems like at an all-time high. So I have, you can probably tell, I have Star Trek-like optimism because out of these challenges we're facing, I'm seeing incredible resilience and creativity by people all around the world. That's the other thing I would just say is I'm spending more time away from Silicon Valley because I'm seeing this innovation happening everywhere in the world. And I really mean everywhere. So that's very heartening to me too, is to see this next round and level of innovation being really a global phenomenon. And it's been exciting and fun. Like our lead identity shop for doing this work happens in Slovenia. So it's like it's a big world, but it's a small world. And I'm looking forward to my next trip over your way.
Yeah, I mean, awesome. We're definitely going to organize our next public chat, if the need be, and if you're available in Slovenia live, and then relay that into the space, the final frontier. So Tomash just reminded me of the words that we used to use, but we need to use them more often in our presentations. We took them from Captain Picard.
Sure. Captain Picard. All right.
Yeah. Everything is impossible until it isn't, until it's not. So on that note, I would just like to thank you first and foremost, Greg, for being here with us. I know that you're busy and you have another appointment in a minute coming. As said, we look forward to have another chat with you when you're available, preferably live. And okay. Until then, we're wishing you all the luck, and we're going to let you know when the conversation airs. And I'm sure both communities will love it. Thank you very much.
Take care, guys. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.